Attachment anxiety is often misunderstood as simply needing reassurance or loving too much. But beneath the behaviors, the overthinking, the hypervigilance, the fear of abandonment, there is a deeper psychological layer. There is a shadow. And healing attachment anxiety requires meeting that shadow, not fighting the symptoms. Attachment anxiety is not the problem. It is a strategy, a survival adaptation that once protected you from emotional loss. When connection felt unstable or inconsistent early in life, your nervous system learned to stay alert. It learned that love could disappear, that closeness had to be monitored, that safety depended on anticipation rather than trust. The anxious attachment system develops when care was unpredictable. Sometimes you were met, sometimes you weren't. Sometimes there was warmth, sometimes distance. This inconsistency trained your system to scan for changes. You learned to read tone, mood, silence. You learned to track others instead of staying rooted in yourself. But what often goes unexamined is the shadow side of this pattern. The parts of you that operate outside conscious awareness. The beliefs, defenses, and unmet needs that quietly shape your behavior in relationships. One shadow aspect behind attachment anxiety is unclaimed anger. Many anxiously attached people learned early that expressing anger risked disconnection. If a caregiver withdrew, shut down, or became emotionally unavailable when you were upset, your system learned to suppress anger in order to preserve closeness. Over time, anger didn't disappear. It went underground. Instead of being expressed directly, anger turns inward. It becomes self-blame. You assume that if something goes wrong, it must be because you're not enough. You didn't say the right thing. You asked for too much. You were too sensitive. This internalized anger keeps you stuck in self-criticism while protecting the attachment bond at all costs. Another shadow element is control disguised as care. Attachment anxiety often looks like concern, love, and emotional investment. But underneath, there is frequently a fear-driven attempt to manage outcomes. You may try to prevent abandonment by being indispensable, understanding, forgiving, or endlessly patient. You may over-explain, over-give, or over-accommodate in hopes of stabilizing the connection. This isn't manipulation in a malicious sense. It's a childlike strategy. If I do everything right, I won't be left. But this strategy keeps you focused on managing the relationship instead of experiencing it. You become responsible for emotional safety that should be mutual. A deeper shadow behind attachment anxiety is the belief that separation equals annihilation. For an anxiously attached nervous system, distance doesn't just feel uncomfortable, it feels dangerous. Silence can feel like rejection. Delays can feel like abandonment. Independence in a partner can feel like emotional withdrawal. This fear is not about the present moment. It is a memory stored in the body, a memory of being emotionally alone without the capacity to regulate yourself. Your system learned that connection was survival. So now, the idea of losing someone can feel like losing yourself. Because of this, anxiously attached individuals often tolerate dynamics that hurt them. They stay in unclear, one-sided, or emotionally unavailable relationships not because they don't see the problem, but because leaving activates a deeper terror than staying. The pain of self-betrayal feels safer than the pain of separation. Another shadow aspect is the idealization of others and devaluation of self. Attachment anxiety often comes with a distorted relational hierarchy. The partner's needs, moods, and availability are placed above your own. Their withdrawal feels catastrophic. Their approval feels regulating. This creates an imbalance where your sense of worth becomes externally anchored. In this dynamic, you may unconsciously believe that the other person is more emotionally capable, more secure, more valuable than you. You may assume that if they pull away, it must mean you failed. This belief prevents you from seeing reality clearly. It keeps you focused on earning love instead of evaluating whether the relationship is actually meeting your needs. There is also a shadow of unmet dependency needs. Many anxiously attached people were forced into emotional self-reliance too early. You may have been praised for being mature, independent, or easy, while your need for comfort went unnoticed. As an adult, these unmet needs resurface with intensity. You may long to be chosen, prioritized, or emotionally held in a way you never experienced consistently. But because dependency was once unsafe, you may feel ashamed of these needs. You may judge yourself for wanting reassurance or closeness. This internal conflict, needing connection while feeling ashamed of the need, fuels anxiety even further. Attachment anxiety also has a shadow relationship with fantasy. When reality feels unstable, the mind fills in gaps. You may imagine future security, potential, or emotional depth that isn't fully present. You may attach not to who someone is, but to who they could be. Fantasy becomes a way to regulate anxiety when the present feels uncertain. This keeps you emotionally invested even when behavior doesn't align. You stay connected to hope rather than evidence. Letting go of fantasy can feel like losing the relationship, even if the relationship was never fully there. Healing attachment anxiety means turning toward these shadow aspects with honesty. Not to judge them, but to understand them. Your anxiety is not a flaw, it is a messenger. It points to unintegrated parts of you that learn to survive through hyperconnection. One of the most important steps in healing is reclaiming anger in a healthy way. This means allowing yourself to feel frustration when your needs aren't met instead of explaining it away. It means recognizing when something hurts instead of immediately asking how you can fix yourself. Another step is shifting from external regulation to internal safety. This doesn't mean becoming emotionally closed. It means learning to ground yourself when anxiety arises instead of immediately reaching outward. Pausing before reacting. Naming what you feel. Reminding your nervous system that discomfort is not danger. Healing also requires grieving. Grieving the relationships where you overextended yourself. Grieving the childhood moments when you needed comfort and didn't receive it. Grieving the belief that love must be chased. This grief is not weakness. It is integration. As you work with the shadow behind attachment anxiety, your relationships begin to change. You become less reactive to distance. You tolerate uncertainty without collapsing. You stop interpreting every shift as a threat. You start evaluating compatibility instead of availability. You also begin to choose differently. You notice when someone cannot meet you emotionally, and instead of trying harder, you step back. Not from punishment, but from self-respect. You learn that anxiety is not a signal to chase. It's information to slow down. Eventually, attachment anxiety softens not because you learn to suppress it, but because the parts of you that were afraid are no longer alone. You become the steady presence you were always seeking. And from that place, connection stops feeling like survival and starts feeling like choice.